Hello, everybody. You are listening to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio Clutch with Keon Rose. That's me. Thank you so much for joining me today, giving me just a little piece of your time. You know that I appreciate you. Could not do this without you. Could not do this without you. We have so many things to talk about. A whole NCAA tournament gone by. And you know what? We almost had no SEC representation in the Sweet 16. We almost had none. And then Texas A&M decided to rise up and fight back in the last 32 seconds of a game against Northern Iowa. I almost feel bad for those guys from Northern Iowa because of how hard they fought in that game. They played a good game, just collapsed at the end. And Texas A&M bringing the SEC in. And that brings up to me a lot of conversation about conference wars and how you hate a school until suddenly everyone's against your conference and then suddenly that school is the greatest thing ever. Love to talk about that a little bit more. Love to talk about gender politics and gender equality in sports. We have a nice tennis conversation because of an interview involving Novak Djokovic and his responses. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But before we jump into anything else, I'd like to talk to you about the platforms. Where can you find us and how can we reach you? You know we'd love to. You know we'd love to. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. You hit us with anything that you find interesting, any news that you think is cool, and we always respond back. That's right, 100% response rate. And you can find us also on YouTube, our classic episodes. Never, ever, ever call them old. It's just a formality thing. But you can go back through YouTube and listen to all of those. Plus, you get to see what we look like. And the YouTube streams live. You have no excuses. Also, you can follow us simply on hotnewstalkradio.com and on the TuneIn Radio app. The TuneIn Radio app. Simply search Hot News Talk Radio on the app. Give us a follow. Press play. It's free in the Apple Store or the Google Play Store for your mobile device. So with all of that said, oh, by the way, cannot fail to mention the Bloom Sky app. Download the Bloom Sky app as well. This is how Hot News Talk Radio gets its weather to you. If you can't listen to Hot News Talk Radio, make sure that you get the Bloom Sky app. Remember, when Tennessee has questions about weather, turn to Hot News Talk Radio. So now, with all of that said, I got to talk about this game, man, with Texas A&M and Northern Iowa. Now, this was inconsequential to me, this game, in terms of my bracket. My bracket is surprisingly not completely in shambles. I did have Xavier in my Final Four. That one does hurt a little bit. But my bracket still somehow not entirely in shambles. And it's good to note that for a number of reasons. But one being, I still have a reason to actually tune into these games. And because the bracket gives you extra motivation to watch the games. The brackets are an extra reason. You don't normally, I don't typically anyway, root for Oregon. I don't spend any time watching Northern Illinois or any of these other teams that make the tournament. And the brackets give me a good reason to follow these teams and to really, really emotionally invest and care. That's why March Madness is one of the best sporting dates on the sports calendar. But in this particular game, I really did want an SEC school to make it to the Sweet 16 because for whatever reason, people remember that stuff. And we talk about it and we go, this is how good your conference is. And this is how bad your conference is. If X amount of schools can make it to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four. And I think it's silly. I think it's silly that we do that because the SEC has played some good basketball this season. I think it all came to the second half of the season when people kind of already judged the SEC as not being a really great basketball conference. But the way that Tennessee finished the season, I'm very hopeful for the SEC's future. Texas A&M was solid all year long. Georgia had some great moments as well. And you're looking at the SEC and going this is a conference that plays solid basketball. They just don't have that reputation. And Kentucky as well. Kentucky, I think, is the big shock for not being there, obviously, because of because of their reputation, because of the talent that they always recruit, because John Calipari is their head coach. Kentucky's probably the biggest surprise of all, but you have Kentucky and you have Tennessee on the rise and Georgia on the rise and A&M playing great all year. Like, that's a good basketball conference. If you have, 4 to 5 schools that you can look at and go, like, these schools are really good, ranging from, are really good to can be really good, I think your conference is fine. Okay? You're fine. Obviously, you're not going to make the tournament, and if you do, you're not going to be one of the higher seeds. So the ACC is going to try and lord it over everybody's head that we have 6 schools in the Sweet 16, but it's like, yeah, you guys have all the higher seeds too. We kind of all expected you to be here, like, surprise, surprise. And some of those games that got you here were so close as to, it could have easily gone the other way. We could have had maybe just one ACC school in the Sweet 16. Like, I don't think that this conference defense mentality works. I don't think it means anything. And that's, let go of your conference and just root for your school, especially in big tournaments like these. Like, it makes sense, I guess, to root for the conference in bowl games because bowl games are individual events of their own. You can kind of add up the bowl games and say, look, this is how many bowl games we were eligible for. This is how many games we won. In a tournament, in a one and done tournament, there is so much that can go right, so much that can go wrong. And, some conferences have more teams in than others. There's so much up to a committee and all of those things that, like, rooting for the SEC in the NCAA tournament doesn't work, especially in a basketball perspective. I maybe the football side makes more sense, but even then, I'm a Texas Longhorn fan, and I don't defend the Big 12 at all for any reason. I don't like the other teams in the conference. I like Texas, and that's it. Like, I enjoy watching Baylor because they score a lot of points and they're fun. I enjoy watching TCU for that same reason. I even enjoy the way that Texas Tech battled in a lot of their games as well. And Texas Tech is horrible, but I'm not going to root for the Big 12 against another conference. I root for Texas. That's it. I don't like all the other schools. And I certainly don't like Oklahoma. Of all the schools, I know I don't like Oklahoma. I root against them actively always. That's just how it is. And I don't care if they've got Buddy Hield or whoever it is that's really good for them. I just don't root for them. And so I think it's something that it's more prevalent in the South. I noticed that you guys stick up for your conference. And there is a lot to respect about that. Like, if someone is coming in and talking about the conference as a whole, an Alabama fan will defend a Tennessee fan. An Alabama fan will defend a Georgia fan for the conference as a whole. And you cannot see that anywhere else. That doesn't happen anywhere else in sports. You don't look at the AFC South and everyone's like, your division is horrible, and see Titans fans sticking up for Texans fans. It doesn't happen. There's something about college football in the South that you will defend this conference. And the SEC is a great conference, by the way. There's not... You're going to have your occasional blowhards get on the air and say things about the conference. Colin Cowherd's going to say what he's going to say. Danny Cannell's going to say what he's going to say. The usual suspects who don't like the SEC. They're going to say what they're going to say. And, you can't really pay attention to those guys, but I don't think there's anybody watching sports and certainly not watching football in their right mind and going, oh, yeah, no, the SEC is a terrible conference. They're amazing. SEC football is some of the best football out there. If not the best football out there. Like, you could argue that. You could, in terms of offense and defense, well-rounded teams. SEC, they're better than the Big 12. I think they're more deep than the Pac-12 by a little bit. They're certainly more deep than the ACC, and they're bigger and stronger. It's the Big 10 is probably the more comparable conference, and even then, they're more defensive-minded than offensive-minded over there in the Big 10. So, SEC's got a great conference, but you don't have to defend it. Let the blowhards who talk. You don't have to defend the conference. Everybody else with eyes can see that it's great. You're listening to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. That's me. Thank you for joining me today, giving me just a little bit of your time. I want to talk about Novak Djokovic just a little bit, because he was talking about women's tennis, and you kind of stumble around in those conversations. He got criticized for what he said a little bit, and I understand some of the criticism, but part of it too is that, like, when you ask a guy questions on the spot, he's going to say some things. They're going to sound clunky. They're going to sound a little weird. And it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be beautiful. It's not like he got to sit down and plan what he was going to say and then still somehow said something that was just absolutely offensive and ridiculous. In fact, what he said was not even really offensive and ridiculous, so much as he was responding to somebody who was offensive and ridiculous. Indian Wells CEO Raymond Moore had some really bad and stupid thoughts on women's tennis. Raymond Moore is a CEO. He's the CEO of Indian Wells Tennis Garden, which hosts tennis tournaments. Currently hosting the BNP Paribas tournament. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly at all, but he had some comments to say about it, and they were wrong. The tournament director, Ray Moore, basically said that female players in tennis should go down on their hands and knees and thank men for carrying the sport. And so there was a reporter that asked Novak Djokovic what he thought about this, and Djokovic said that he said, quote, "I don't know what to say. I heard about it. Obviously, it's a very delicate and sensitive subject to talk about. Women deserve respect and admiration for what they're doing. You know, equal prize money was the main subject of the tennis world in the last 7 to 8 years. I've been through that process as well, and I understand how much power and energy the WTA and all the advocates for equal prize money have invested in order to reach that. And I applaud that for them. I applaud them for that. Honestly, I do. They fought for what they deserve, and they got it." And then he goes on to mention that he thinks that men should be paid more because they draw more spectators to more matches. And I understand that, like, if that's true, because I don't think he's necessarily wrong. Like, if that's true, then he's probably right about that. In as much as you're drawing the bigger attendance, you get paid more. In the same way that the NBA and WNBA, people just tend to want to watch men's sports more for whatever reason. And I tend to think that people like the aggression more and the anger more that you tend to see in men's sports that you don't necessarily see in women's sports, which isn't to say, by the way, that there isn't aggression in women's sports. I don't know if you've seen Serena Williams hit a tennis ball, but it's violent. That's violent, okay? And I watched women's water polo during the last Olympics because it was just on and I was home. And you know what? I mean, there is the stuff that they do under the water that you can't see, that NBC started putting cameras down there so you can see what's happening. There's pinching, there's punching, there's kicking. It's violent, okay? I just think that men's sports get that rap of, like, here's the aggression and here's the violence. And part of that kind of adds up into what we see as the ideal of a champion that draws people probably more to men's sports than women's sports. But in the case of tennis, like, tennis does not look demonstratively different from the men's game to the women's game. It looks roughly the same. Like, if you had to hit back a serve from Novak Djokovic, you'd never be able to do it. He hits like 100-mile-per-hour serve. But if you had to return something from Maria Sharapova, she's not hitting 112, but she's hitting like 98. That's still really fast. Like, your average person is not going to stand a chance against Maria Sharapova, Serena Williams, you know, any woman player. You're not going to stand a chance. Like, there's not a huge drop-off there, okay? I think men's tennis is probably deeper. There are more men at a competitive level in terms of guys actually competing for a championship. But even then, it's still not like a bunch of guys. It's Novak Djokovic, it's Roger Federer, it's Rafael Nadal, they're aging, and Andy Murray. That's it. Those are like the 5 guys. Usually when you see a major tennis tournament won, it's one of those 5 guys. In women's tennis, it's Serena, it's Maria, it's Yelena. That's about it. So what? Like they're two people short. Like it doesn't. There's not a huge enough drop off there, the way you see in NBA attendance, the WNBA attendance, and the way you see in baseball in college and softball in college. Like the drop off is there. It does exist, but you're not seeing it to that same extent, to that same level. So while I agree with Novak Djokovic that possibly the prize money could go the men's way, the reporter did ask him that if women made more money, should they be paid more? And he agreed again. But it's weird that we have this situation where you're talking about women in sports, and we as men who watch sports, we don't know how to have these discussions. We don't know how to have these discussions. And I've heard a number of solutions, and I don't know how else to say this, so I think I'm just going to bluntly say it. Like, we don't have enough women in sports media, okay? And when we do, they're Michelle Tafoya, they're Leslie Visser, Lisa Salters, Doris Burke there for a while, Aaron Andrews, sideline reporters. We just make them sideline reporters, or we make them host like really inane shows like First Take on ESPN, like really terrible shows. That's it. We don't have women with hard-hitting sports takes in sports radio. We don't have enough women writing. So when we have these conversations of gender come up with, not just this one, but where, the NFL hires a female referee, or the NFL institutes the Rooney Rule, but for women instead of racial diversity, they do it for women. And we have these conversations, and either we have a really short conversation because we don't want to say a whole lot and step on toes, or we have a long conversation, say way too much and step on toes, or just like sound like we have no idea what we're talking about. And we never have that nuance that the conversation deserves because we don't have enough women in sports media. And when we do, you have to bring a woman in as a specialist instead of having her there in the first place. And that's absurd to me. And I think ESPNW is doing a lot in regards to having women in the sports media doing stuff. But I still don't like that they have that distinction, like ESPNW, almost as this warning to guys that don't really want to listen to women talk. Yeah, just kind of bounce that way. Just avoid this. It's not for you. And, there's so many talented female broadcasters. We don't end up having the nuance that this conversation deserves. And so you've got Novak Djokovic in an interview kind of stumbling around, well, women go through different things. Their training is different and harder because hormones and, different stuff. Let me pull up the quote actually and read it for you, because I'm trying to do it justice in its awkwardness. And again, Novak didn't have time to prepare what he was going to say. So it's naturally going to sound awkward. Shove a microphone in my face without preparation, and I'm going to say awkward and clunky things too. In fact, I'm sure that even with preparation, I stand in front of this microphone and say the most awkward and clunky things. Like you just, when you're asked to talk, okay, sometimes the time given to you to talk is just giving you rope, and you're going to hang yourself. Like it's only a matter of time. Now, fortunately, Novak Djokovic, he showed a willingness to be politically correct and showed a willingness to go, like, let's not just be horribly offensive like Ray Moore, because why would you have to do that? As long as there's a willingness there, you're never going to sound dreadful. But there's times where we don't understand the nature of the conversation. And while we don't sound bad, we don't sound good either. And we have these conversations about women in sports, and we have these conversations about domestic abuse and domestic violence. And while these things can happen to men, we behave as though when they happen to women, we're just as capable as covering that as any woman could be. And I don't think that that's true necessarily. I think we do need more women in our sports media. I don't have an initiative planned. Like I don't have a thing to go out there and like do about it, but it would be nice to see that. It truly, truly would. You just kind of feel you feel like we don't have enough of this. And every time you hear someone say something, not just Raymond Moore, but anyone else in the public eye, just saying something absolutely ignorant and ridiculous, it comes to my attention that, like, as much as I can try and as much as I can do research to prepare for a conversation like this, I can never fully know what it's like to be a woman. You're listening to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. That's me. Thank you for joining me, giving me just a little sliver of your time. We're going to do more tournament talk and a more in-depth breakdown of Texas A&M and Northern Iowa. They had a 0.001% chance of winning that game, A&M did, and they won it.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
We're going to kill them all. We're going to kill them all. Let them cough. Let them wheeze. Let them sneeze. We're going to kill every one of them.
We're going to stop you dead in your tracks. Black mold has been known to mimic ailments such as asthma, emphysema, and other ailments that affect the well-being of your body. Black mold is the silent killer. Fight back today with a free estimate from PuroClean. The paramedics of property damage is PuroClean. Call 875-6136 for your free inspection and estimate today. And no, bleach does not kill mold. In fact, bleach is primarily made up of water and adds more moisture to your mold. The mold experts at PuroClean use proven products and state-of-the-art science equipment. They'll remove all traces of that deadly killer black mold. Call PuroClean now at 875-6136. Plus, your homeowner's insurance may cover it. Call PuroClean today at 875-6136.
We're going to kill every one of them.
Not if PuroClean has anything to do with it. Call PuroClean today at 875-6136.
Expect clear and cold weather out there through the nighttime. Another light freeze possible. Overnight lows 30 to 33. For Tuesday, lots of sunshine. A warming trend kicks off with highs into the mid-60s. Continue dry and pleasant for Wednesday, highs mid and upper 60s. This forecast is brought to you by Hamilton Medical Center in Dalton. Proud to be named #1 by CareChex for medical excellence and overall hospital care in the Northwest Georgia and Chattanooga region. And I'm 1412 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Orr.
On AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
When the weather turns bad, turn to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. On the net, hotnewstalkradio.com. Follow us on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. From the Hot News Talk Radio Weather Center. Chattanooga, we've got you covered. When the weather turns bad, the Tennessee Valley turns to Hot News Talk Radio.
Go, 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 go.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. A shooting in a car crash at the Cancun's on Brainerd Road leads to one man shot and another one arrested. Police say the victim checked himself into a hospital and gave police a report of what happened. The CPD responded to the Cancun's where they found an unoccupied vehicle which had crashed into the gas pumps. A short time later, they arrested their suspect. Mr. Harris was booked into the Hamilton County Jail. He is charged with felony reckless driving, leaving the scene of an accident, possession of drugs for resale, and possession of drug paraphernalia. The victim, David Franklin, is expected to live. His gunshot wound is non-life-threatening. A man and a woman found passed out by the CPD at the Speedway parking lot on March the 9th say that they were sold opium by a man known as C, a nickname for Coleman. Well, the police found their suspect, Mr. Coleman, and arrested him. He claims that he's one of the Detroit boys who moved to Cleveland from Detroit, Michigan. He was staying on Youngstown Road. He was arrested and admitted to selling heroin, $150 to $200 worth of heroin every month. He said that he had 8 to 10 regular customers. If it's going on in the Tennessee Valley, it's going on Hot News Talk Radio.
Hot News Talk 1240.
So we have a lot of things planned for you coming up here today. We've got, got a full docket. We're going to continue talking about women's stuff because, first off, over the weekend, and I got to pull up the score here because it was an embarrassing score in women's college basketball that we got to talk about. We got to talk about Northern Iowa and A&M some more because someone has made an entire collage of Iowa and Iowa basketball pain. Now that Northern Iowa has lost to Texas A&M, the Iowa collage of pain is finally complete. But before we jump into all of that, I want to talk about equality a little bit more. And of course, Jay Asks, our very popular segment where Jay asks questions about sports on behalf of people who really don't know too much about sports, but want to learn. You know, I mean, it's about growing the hobby. You know, this is something that's important to us. If you really, guys, if you want to watch the game with whomever, your wife, your girlfriend, your daughters, your sons, whoever, and they don't like sports, you got to teach them. Okay, you got to let them listen to this show. So we've got Jay Asks coming up, March Madness edition, because we've got a lot of things to talk about there. I convinced the lovely Miss J to go fill out an NCAA bracket, and the results are interesting. In college basketball, Texas A&M and Northern Iowa, with 32 seconds to go, Texas A&M was down 12 and had a 0.01% chance of winning that game. As you know, they did win that game, and 32 seconds is part belief on behalf of Texas A&M, that will to fight, that will to never give up, that we attribute so much to sports. Like, this is the actual case where it applies. Your desire to win, and then you have another team who also desires to win, right? Because for some reason, if you win the game, you're the one that wanted it most. Northern Iowa wanted it just as bad. They just imploded. They imploded. It happens. Okay, surely anybody who's ever played a game of pickup basketball can agree that you get close to the end of some of those games and you just mental lapses everywhere. You're just gone. Like, you can't make right decisions. You're losing your guy on defense. We've all been there. Don't judge these kids too harshly. I feel my heart goes out to Northern Iowa today because of how tragic that is. The collage of pain is now complete in Iowa. The state of Iowa has a collage of pain dating all the way back to 2001. In 2001, number 15 Hampton beat Iowa State number 2, 58-57. It's the fourth 15-2 upset in NCAA history. In 2006, Northwestern State number 14 knocked off number 3 Iowa 64-63 with a 3-point buzzer beater with 0.5 seconds left. Half of a second. Back in 2008, Western Kentucky beats Drake 101-99. Drake University. Western Kentucky hits a 26-foot buzzer beater in overtime to knock off Drake University. And of course, 2016, number 3 Texas A&M takes out number 11 Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa blowing the 12-point lead in 44 seconds. Gone. Double overtime. I mean, it was a wonderful game. Like, that to me is what March Madness is about. That puts the madness in March Madness. That's what it's about. But also over the weekend, and I want to talk about this a little bit because it does tie into my point of gender equality somewhat. And it was interesting because Jay's in studio for the Jay Ask segment, and also she was showing me some stuff about emojis and how emojis oftentimes, not oftentimes really, I mean, they pretty much just depict women doing nothing. Like any sport emoji, any emoji where a person is doing stuff is basically a guy. The women female emojis, and I don't know how many of you do the texting business. Emojis are a huge part of texting. Some of us old fogies haven't quite got the hang of it yet. I know I haven't, and I still abuse and misuse emojis constantly. But with that said, there's something to be said about here's a thing that is a part of our communication that says that women don't do anything. And it's interesting because I want to tie this into college basketball, to women's college basketball, right? The University of Tennessee is in the Sweet 16. Holly Warlick is the head coach. I think she got, I mean, I've criticized her. She's gotten criticism all across the board from everywhere. And I think it's a little unfair, right? She's following Pat Summitt. Okay, that's a heck of an act to follow. She's following Pat Summitt. And Holly Warlick's done her best, but she's gotten this team to the Sweet 16, which is a lot further than I think that anybody had them going. And she's gotten this team here, but I don't really want to talk about them so much as I want to talk about UConn. UConn had a game over the weekend where it looked like one of those girls' high school basketball scores. I remember we talked about on this show about a month ago, a high school girls basketball team that beat another team 108-2. Okay. And the other coach is going, no, we weren't trying to run up the score, all of these things. And it's just like, how could you not? You beat them 108-2. And then on the other side, like, how do you only score 2 points in a game? You know, and it's all this lopsided stuff, but you don't see it in college basketball. You know, you don't see it that much in college basketball, not at that level, because quite frankly, the level of play is much higher. Teams are better coached on equal footing from that standpoint. But the UConn women, they're going for their 4th championship in a row. Okay. And while that does speak to the greatness of Gino Auriemma as a coach and the fact that they've won 90 straight games and they've won 116 out of their last 117, another thing kind of emerges, which is like, part of it is that UConn is that great. But the other part of it is the rest of women's college basketball isn't. It's not that deep. And that if you want to be a woman in sports, especially playing basketball, you've got to go to UConn. You've got to go to the University of Connecticut. That is the only way that you're going to get the recognition that you feel that you deserve. You've got to go to UConn. And that means the other schools, the talent is not distributed very easily because no woman wants to go to a Utah or Mississippi State and try and build up a Mississippi State basketball program that's not going to win a title. And it is unfair in large part. And I think I was listening to the Trifecta podcast on ESPN. I like to listen to Sarah Spain and Kate Fagan because I think they're very good and they're women in broadcasting, that they know what they're talking about, and they think about this in a way that I don't have that mindset to think about it that way. But basically, the pinnacle of women's basketball athletics is the college level, because women don't make nearly as much money in the pros. You don't have that golden ticket of making it to the NBA the way the guys do. So you can be in a bad basketball program as a guy, knowing full well, like, I'm going to have more chances in the NBA. I can make it to the NBA. The WNBA is not really a goal for women's college basketball players. And if it is, it's because they grew up watching people in the WNBA that were really good. Most of the money that you can make is overseas if you're a woman playing basketball. Actually, you don't make a ton of money over here in the States. And I've got to say, it's because of the views that we have of women that we don't think that they can particularly do anything. And I don't think that we do it on purpose and that our views aren't progressive or whatever. I just think that we've instilled it in our culture, saying things like, you play like a girl, or you shoot like a girl, or you throw like a girl, or you run like a girl. Like there's a stigma attached to quote unquote like a girl. And what that says to women playing athletics growing up is that like your version of this is not as good as the men's version of this, which is why I think that Ronda Rousey for mixed martial arts and fighting was huge, because fights like a girl means something different if it's fights like Ronda Rousey. Okay. If it's fights like Holly Holm, it means something else entirely. That is a vicious woman there. And I've got to say, we've got to start doing this a little bit better and a little bit differently. We've just got to.
I'm not having it,
Stephen A. Smith. Not having it. We can't do this the same way all along. And we've got to find a way, and we've got to start talking about it first and foremost. And by the way, that Stephen A. cut is coming from this much longer clip that I just find wildly hilarious.
You don't want to make an enemy out of me. And I'm looking right into the camera, and I'm going to say it again. You do not want to make an enemy out of me. I'm not having it.
Stephen A. Smith, ladies and gentlemen, he is the best. And I know that was the clunkiest, most awkward transition of all time, but like it just, there's no way. I was trying to get Miss J's attention, and I can't leave silence on the radio.
I'm so sorry.
So I let Stephen A. Smith go.
You accomplished the goal of not having that air.
Woo, so there we go. That's just how they teach you in school.
Which Stephen A. Smith was it?
Stephen A. Smith, I'm not having it. He's not having it. You don't want to make an enemy out of him.
And I'm glad that this is like on YouTube that I could watch later. Right. That's exactly why we have the YouTube.
I know, because you never know what can happen here. You need to listen to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio on YouTube. Stream us live or check out our classic episodes. We're here for Jay Asks, our popular segment, back by popular demand. As always, this is the March Madness edition. And so let's just jump right into it here on AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
I'm all about it.
Because you filled out a bracket for the very first time in your life. And it did not go the way that you hoped.
I wanted it so we're using an app that Keon sent us. And
it's the CBS Sports app that we filled out our brackets on there.
That's what I said.
There you go. We'll get there.
And it's great because it's like Christmas, right? Except it's really not supposed to be Christmas. It's supposed to look like springtime with like beautiful green and happiness. And mine looks more like a candy cane than anything else, as in there's more red, and red means fail. And so the message that I'm learning from my March Madness bracket is that I really shouldn't worry too much about men's basketball.
but Kansas is in the Sweet 16, and you still got them as your champion
until
they
win.
They either make it there.
They need to win.
Now here's the thing, because we're at an impasse right now. Because all right, we've got a diving microphone here.
Wow.
It came out to attack. So you've got Kansas going to the national championship. I have Maryland going to my Final Four. Kansas and Maryland play this upcoming Thursday, I believe. So now we're at an impasse here, because if Kansas beats Maryland, first off, that's another part of my Final Four gone. I lost Xavier yesterday, so everyone's lost at least one in the hot news tournament,
really good here.
Tournament group. It's been rough times, but don't worry. We're regrouping and coming back. So what are your March Madness questions?
Yes, my March Madness questions are so that I won't end up in a situation like this again.
Okay.
So I didn't realize that each team has numbers. There are all numbers, and I thought the numbers were from A to Z, where I think it's 16. I thought it was like 1 to 16.
There's 16.
Just alphabetically, all of the names of the teams, and I know that there's the 2 conferences, right? Like you've got the West and the East.
Oh, okay. This works out much more difficultly in college hoops. In college sports, basically, because all of these different schools form their own unique conferences.
Wait, what?
You can go ahead.
Each school is its own conference?
No, each groups of schools
okay.
have formed their own conferences, right? So Tennessee plays in the Southeastern Conference, the SEC, as it is commonly known. The reason why their main rivals tend to be Alabama and Georgia and Ole Miss and Florida are because these are the other schools in the conference, right? So you win your conference or you do well inside your conference, and you can qualify for the NCAA tournament, which they try and randomize it and separate all the schools and everything so that you can have
it's random. So
yeah, it's basically a committee sitting there going, we watched Oregon play. Oregon is the best school. Oregon's number 1.
Okay.
It's a committee sitting there going, you know what? We don't think very highly of Cal State Bakersfield, so they're 15. Oh. And I literally, those are just the examples I looked at there.
Okay, so these numbers are given. I'm sure there's some sort of statistical merit to the numbers. Maybe?
Yes.
No?
Yes, they try to, but again, it's semi-flawed because it's a bunch of people. It's just a bunch of committee members. Like they know mostly, but like what can you really know until it gets played? So you have 14s beating 3s and 12s beating 5s sometimes.
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
How
also known as the upset.
When I am making a bracket, so I figured out the big numbers and little numbers. You want a little number, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if I have a little number and a big number, like we had that happen, I should probably find it and give you an exact example. But we had like, I guess what you called an upset where a big number lost or won over a little number.
We had a few of those. We had there were a few 12s beating 5s. There was we hoped that Chattanooga would be one of those.
Like
they
Yale and Baylor was a good one.
Yale beat Baylor. Arkansas Little Rock beat Purdue.
Yes.
So you had a couple of those. You had some 14s take out some 3s with
like we had VCU take out Oregon State, which VCU was a 10 and Oregon was a 7.
Right. And
However,
those are so close together.
In number, right.
8 and 9 and 7 and 10, those bunch. You've just got to you've just got to guess with those. I'm going to be completely honest with you.
So break down for me how you can have some of those bigger gaps in which the ones that should be higher lose.
The reason why this happens in a lot of times is because the schools that get the big numbers, sometimes you end up with a school that plays in a small conference and maybe they haven't played anybody big. Mm-hmm. So okay, they're winning their conference, so they're good, but they're playing this tiny, they're playing in the Western Athletic Conference. There's some tiny conference that nobody pays attention to.
Okay.
And they're going up against the powerhouse in, say, the ACC. The ACC's got schools like North Carolina and Duke and big schools. And so you assume the little school can't beat the big school.
Well, okay.
And that's what the committee assumes, that you haven't played anybody really. And then this little school comes out and goes, don't you underestimate us.
I'm a little lost.
And they knock them off.
A little lost. So like 12 and 5.
Right.
Little Rock at 12 and Purdue at 5. But Little Rock, the 12 wins.
Yeah.
So Keon, I know you may not know the exact walk down of each of those, but if you could explain to me kindly how something like that, like I know that's what you were explaining now.
Right.
Maybe break it down just a little slower because you're using big words like AAC and things like that.
Right.
I don't know what that means.
Which all that is that's just a group of schools playing. A conference is just a grouping of schools
chosen by
those schools. Those schools decided, you know what? Tennessee decided, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi State, University of Mississippi, we're all a conference.
How many conferences are there?
A lot.
Okay.
But there are 6 big ones, the major conferences.
Okay. So hypothetically, anybody can get together and create a conference.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So we've got 6 majorly recognized conferences. And those 16 numbers are assigned by those conferences or just overall team goodness based on the committee?
Overall team goodness based on the committee.
Wow.
The committee is charged with going through all of the schools in the nation and going, these are the 64 best teams in this tournament.
So why don't the numbers go from like a 1 to 64?
They don't go from 1 to 64 because they divided the tournament into 4 regions to get schools from playing in their home court advantage.
So each of the 4 regions has 1 to 16?
Yes.
Oh, so there's 4 sets of 16.
And there's 4 sets of 1s. And
So-
Oregon is considered the number one overall. They're the best of the ones.
So they're the number one.
Yes.
Okay. So if you had a number 1, so you could have a number 1, a number 1, a number 1, and a number 1, 4 of the number 1s together. But analyzing those 4 number 1s, you could have numbers that say, like Oregon in this case, is so much better than the 4th number 1.
Yes.
But just based on the conference that they're in, that we've divided them in for March Madness.
Right.
So there's 6 major conferences and infinite, hypothetically, numbers of other conferences. And then
Yeah, they call those regions. So we can so we can not confuse
oh,
ourselves.
that sounds good.
So there's the 4 regions.
Okay.
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 Yeah, the grouping of schools, those are called conferences. You play inside your conference, and then the committee looks at you doing that and looks at that school doing that. And then when they choose to put you in the tournament, they'll put you in different regions. So say you play in the South
So
usually.
does every school make a region? Or do you have, like, are there more schools than the 64 schools?
Yeah, there are more schools. There's schools that don't make it. There's schools that are considered to be on the bubble, that you're close, but we like this school just a little bit better.
And by that, I mean, I know that there are more than 64 schools, but I mean, in terms of, so basically when you're playing in your conference, we're going to rank you based on your conference. No, we're going to rank you based on your region. And if you fit 1 through 16 of the region, that's how you get into the regional playoffs. Why is this so confusing?
Because it is confusing.
Oh my gosh.
They basically you play in your conference, and then when they put you in the tournament's just divided into 4 regions. Regardless, there's the regions are the South, Southwest, Midwest, and
so
East.
So why would I want to play for a conference then?
You'd want to play for a conference because that determines like who you'll be playing against regularly, your competition.
Right.
So not being in a conference makes it harder to schedule. Other schools aren't going to randomly want to just play you whenever.
I'm trying to find different ways to ask, how do I get into the regional playoffs?
You make the tournament and they'll put you in a region.
What tournament?
The tournament that we are selecting here.
So how
in
do
March
I
Madness.
get in? How do I make that tournament?
The committee decides that you make that tournament.
Oh, so technically it doesn't matter unless you've done crazy good.
And they're trying to do the criteria based on like how well you've done. So sometimes it's easy to tell. Like Oregon's played a tough schedule and they played a good conference.
So a tough schedule meaning they're like playing 9 to 5 every day, like a scheduling or scheduling.
Schedule as in the other schools that they've played are also considered good schools. Like that school's got a winning record.
Okay.
This school's got a winning record,
so
etc.
Presumably the game would be more intense.
Yes.
Okay.
As opposed to I'm the University of Tennessee. Let's play Stony Brook.
Okay.
University.
So in other words, the little numbers don't really mean anything.
The numbers do. The numbers do mean something, but because the numbers are an estimate, they're just somebody's best guess. They're not set in stone.
So no, the numbers don't really mean that much, but go for the small numbers if you can. If they're further away from the bigger numbers.
If you can help it, never choose a 16 over a 1. Just never do it. Just never do it. Because that one is set in stone. Because it's never happened.
Oh,
you give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
And that's our show today, folks. Thank you so much for joining Clutch with Keon Rose. Jay asked the March Madness edition.
It's just March Madness. There's no
there is no March. It's just madness. But you know what? I've had a good time playing the tournament pool, and hopefully Michelle won't do it again. You've been listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. Thank you so much for joining me, giving me just a little piece of your time, and I hope you'll join me tomorrow from 6 to 7 here on AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
Kansas win.
Shake, shake, shake it at Five Guys Burgers and Fries. The most delicious and unique milkshakes. How about this for delicious and different? Add freshly cooked bacon to any milkshake.
Is that even legal?
You bet your milkshake and booty it is. Chocolate caramel bacon shake. coffee caramel shake. All hand blended. Shake, shake, shake it. Down at Five Guys Burgers and Fries. Just about any flavor shake that you can imagine. And they are delicious. Get your shake, shake, shake on at Five Guys Burgers and Fries. Five Guys Burgers and Fries, located in Hickson at North Point. Gun Barrel at the Walmart Center. Downtown 4th and Broad. And in Cleveland at Keith and Stewart.